And here we are on our, I think it's 30th Torah portion of the triennial cycle, the ancient Israeli triennial cycle, not the Masorti conservative movement's weak triennial fake cycle. not that one. The real deal, yeah? So, all right, so let's see. Today's Torah portion, for some reason, why wasn't that on my first? Why isn't it showing up on the first screen? What happened? Where is it? It's up there. It's vayizkor Elohim is what it should be. I don't know why that's not showing, but you can see the nice little lambs, right? Cute, spotted, and striped. This big one looks like it has a carpet on it. He's wearing a carpet. All right, so I don't know what happened. Maybe that slide moved. So the parasha is Genesis chapter 30, verse 22. Look at that, 30th reading in chapter 30 through chapter 31, verse 2. Not too long. And basically, here's what I did. I've got it all prepared if we want to go through it all. I have the slides for that, right? But I took some of them and I backloaded them to the end because I felt like I went a little too long last time. So I don't want to. I'm not sure how you guys feel about going through the whole parasha, right? Like some people I know really love it, right? To technically have gone through the whole thing. And others, sometimes it feels like the teaching is being forced to get through the whole thing, right? I would rather that we focus and what we do cover, we can do well, maybe in about an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes, something like that. So you can really learn from what we're talking about, right? Rather than just forcing to get through. But I'd be interested in feedback from you guys to see what you think. We're using a new microphone today, Baruch Hashem. So I won't tell you where I got it because they're not subsidizing us, the the place. Just kidding about that. If you want to know, just ask me. This is kind of this is to stand in while we get another real microphone in, yeah? I bought one in the States, but it will take a while to get here. So Baruch Hashem for that. So let's just start with a quick prayer. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we're so grateful to you today for everything that you've given us. We're grateful for our lives, for our health, for Shabbat, for Torah, for Mashiach. And just ask Abba that as we go forward with today's lesson, that you would visit us, visit your people. You would send your Ruach and stir up the conversation among those who are listening, give them ideas and insights that we can all learn from one another, not just me teaching up here, but we can all learn and grow more and more each day, improving ourselves, conforming more to the likeness of the Mashiach. And all these things we give you praise and glory by the merit of Yeshua, your son. Okay, well, look at that, an all English prayer. Just kind of felt led to pray in English. The Haftarah is 1 Shemuel, chapter 1, verse 11 through verse 22. And for the guys talking on the Haftarah, the other teachers who love to do the Haftarah, ping me if you want to know what the official full length is, right? Because the index that we use when we're looking up the Haftarah, it tells you where it starts, but doesn't say where it ends. And then within this book that I've got here, I've got this good book, the Bible as read and preached in the old synagogue. This guy, it's pretty good book. Anyway, that guy, when you turn to the actual section that deals with each parasha, it'll say, look, the Egyptian Geniza mostly have it here to here. Some others stop at different parts. So it's not set in stone where the Haftarah ends, but they do say, look, the majority of materials that we found with archaeological support show that it ended at this such a place. So if you're a teacher planning to really go in depth on the Haftarah and you really want to know where did it end in ancient times, the most likely place that ended, instead of you can either just say it ends at a good place, about 10 verses in, right? Most of the time that's true. Or you can ask me and I'll look it up in the book and we'll figure out exactly where that's at, okay? That's so else. All right, let's go on then. Here's the Westminster Leningrad Codex, showing our Torah portion here in the lower right-hand corner. Let me turn on the laser pointer. If you look here, on the lower side of the screen, on the lower right, you can see it, right? The Samech. So this is showing where we start today. Vayizkor Elohim. Then God remembered, right? Et Rachael, vayishma Elohim, Elohim, vayiftach et rachmah, okay? Tahar. And then the rest is up here, we can't see it. So at this time I decided to zoom out a bit to show you how that codex is laid out. You see, it's the 3-column layout, right? There's a nice 3 columns. So, and then of course the Masoretic notes on the sides, on the bottom, and also on the top where you can't see. Okay. Great, people are rolling in. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so let's get reading. Vayizkor Elohim et Rachael. Then God remembered Rachael. Okay, so what does it really mean if we say that God remembered her? There's a commentator, I think it's Ibn Ezra. But I could have it wrong. Where when you see this verb showing up with God, he says, "So what? Does it mean he forgot and then he remembered?" Right? So, of course, he didn't forget and then remember. So this piles on a little bit to this concept we've been talking about lately. I've been sharing with you guys how flexible the vocabulary is in the Hebrew language, in the biblical Hebrew language at least, and how you can have one word that has many, many different meanings or nuances or shades of meanings, and it really makes a difference where we find the word, right? Who's the subject, who's the audience, etc. So in the case of Zakhar, to remember, with a human being, yeah, it means remember, right? But with Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, it doesn't mean He remembered. Obviously, it doesn't mean that. God doesn't forget things, right? He's not like, oh, my brain's not what it used to be. Can you imagine such a silly situation? No. With God, it means He decided to take action, right? So when God remembers, it means He's going to take action. Usually, it's connected to something that He promised, or some decision He'd made before, or an oath, etc., etc. So He's remembering her now, meaning He's going to take action on her behalf. Previously, in last week's parsha, He opened up Leah's womb. So the sages inform us that both sisters, their wombs were closed, right? They were not able to get pregnant. And so Hashem opened up Leah's because He felt bad for Leah, right? Well, it doesn't say He felt bad for her, but it's connected to the concept that because Leah was sanua, because she was the less loved wife, right? Rachael was the most loved, the favorite, really the one that he had tried to get to start with, right? And this is kind of a different situation. If you're looking at biblical polygamy, what happens in the case with Jacob is very different than how we see, for example, in the case with Elkanna, or the case with David HaMelech, or Shaul HaMelech, or these other characters who have multiple wives. There's different things that happen, right? In the case of David, David chooses his wives for very specific reasons, right? There are women that he wants to be part of his family, right? So in the case of Abigail, right, Abigail, he respects Abigail. He considers her also a tzedeket, a righteous woman. The way that she navigates the problem with her husband Naval. Remember Naval, her husband? He refuses to give King David's men anything to eat or drink. Even after they protected his sheep, they kept a lot of them alive from the wolves and all this sorts of stuff. And so Abigail, when David is angry, he's about to slay the guy. He's going to go out and kill him. What does Abigail do? She prepares a meal. She sends it out to them with all kinds of gifts and stuff. She acts really brilliantly and saves her husband. But later she tells her husband what happened, that David was about to kill him. You'd be a dead man, basically, if not for me. And what happens? He has a heart attack. He dies. And so David later marries her. He marries Abigail. And so this isn't any kind of like political alliance or, he saw the value in the woman and he wanted her to be part of his family, part of his dynasty, right? And so this is really, David is kind of at a luxury in his position to choose who he wants to choose to be part of his family. And also with his son, with Shlomo, Solomon. Solomon acts a bit differently than even his father David, right? We don't really see Shlomo marrying specifically out of concern for the character traits of the women. right? The midot. Instead, Shlomo seems to be all about politics. The first wife he takes is what? She's daughter of Egypt. Marries an Egyptian, right? Not a believer, right? Although there's some midrash on that. And then, although the midrash is usually negative for her, that she's the one who led the other wives in burning incense and this kind of stuff. And he takes women, all these foreign women, and the text uses the term nokhriah for each of those women. It's a negative word for foreigner. It's not like a ger or gera, right? Like a woman who's happy to accept the culture of Israel, right? I.e., our God, our diet, our language, etc. These are nochriot. They're foreigners. They keep practicing their wicked ways. So instead of pushing out in the tradition of our ancestors, the Canaanites, the wickedness that they had, or enslaving them so they're not allowed to do idolatry, instead, Shlomo makes this mistake of bringing them in. He's importing idolaters, not just into Israel, but into his own family. And eventually it gets him, right? In the evangelical world, they make a mistake about Shlomo. They think that Shlomo, the reason that he went astray was because he took too many women, right? And yeah, he's very crazy in the number, very too many wives. That's true. He does exceed the number of wives that the rabbis allow for a king. For a king, it's limited to 18. A normal Israeli, it's not limited, but for a king, it's limited 18. Only 18 can the king take. And so in the case of Shlomo, he thought he's beyond this wisdom, so he kind of rationalizes his way out, thinking, well, look, God has given me chokhmah, so that doesn't apply to me because I have wisdom, so I don't really need to worry about that. And that is not the case. Not the case, because he didn't marry believing women. And so they did lead him astray. And it's a great tragedy of the story of Solomon. If you read it, it ends on a sad note. God turns his back on him, right? Solomon betrays the Lord. It's just insane that the most wise man on earth could do such a thing because he surrounds himself and he yoked himself with wickedness. He was not evenly yoked. Instead, he yoked himself to women who were not of our faith. And then in the case of Jacob, it's very different. Another kind of polygamous attitude. In the case of Jacob, he's forced into it, right? He's deceived by Lavan. He didn't choose to have Leah. She was forced on him. And so this is why the text tells us that she was sanua, right? So some sages, they say that she was part of the deception, right? And that Rachel was also part of the deception. Others say no, she had to do exactly what her father said, right? Whatever the case is, she was less loved, so God opened up her womb. Now finally, Rachael, in kindness, has given Jacob another wife. She elevated her maidservant to be a wife for him, which is a kindness to Jacob and also to the maidservant. Okay, please watch your microphones, yeah? It's a kindness to Jacob and to the maidservant. So she has blessed Jacob that he can have more children, so the dynasty can be more strong, it can be stronger, more powerful. And she's also blessed her maidservant. She's given this good lady the reputation of becoming a mother of Israel, right? She's one of the mothers of Israel. So here we have, because of that, the sages say that God decided to show kindness to Rachael because she acted in a kind manner to her husband and to her maidservant. Hashem then acts kind to her, and he vayizkor, he remembers her, meaning he decides to act. So God decides to act with Rachael. Vayishma Eleiha Elohim, vayivtach et rachma, et rachma. Okay, so Vayishma Eleiha Elohim, and God remembered. And God heard her. Right. So what's it mean to say God heard? Does it mean like he literally heard her voice? Before that, he couldn't hear her. Right? No. Again, this is another issue where the verb, it depends who we're talking about. Right. In the case of God, when God hears somebody, it means that he decides to act on their behalf. He hears their petition. He hears their prayer. He accepts it. Right. Kind of like if you go to a court and you're hoping the judge will hear your case, right? Well, here we have the heavenly judge, whether he will hear the case or not, and he decides to hear it, so he allows it. Okay, yeah, someone's asking if we're having a meeting today, trying to join, but they can't get in. Yes, but not the link from this morning. No. The link that says Simchat Hashem. Sorry, I can't. I don't want to give too much tech support while I'm trying to teach. Okay, so he's obviously not just listening. He's deciding to answer her request. So what's he do? Vayiftach. So Yiftach, he opened up et Rachma, her rechem, her womb. This is a pretty interesting word, rechem. From this root, we have rachamim, right, which means mercy, right? One of God's titles is El Rachamim. This was one of the ones that was stolen, actually, in Islam. They had, Muhammad was going for a couple decades, right? And then he decides he likes this Jewish title for God, El Rachamim. So they have also now the Rachamim. They attributed, then they grabbed it later and used that title as well. But it's really nice about Hashem's mercy, right? That he delights in mercy. And we have the verb, rechem, which means to have pity on someone, to have pity on them. And then we have, in the Psalms, we have a rare form where David HaMelech, he's talking to God, he says, Echomcha. And it means in that case, I love you. I love you. So you see this interesting relationship between mercy and pity and graciousness, all these sorts of things. And it actually is love in that case. That David's telling poetically to God, I love you. We have other words for love in Hebrew, right? This one is rare, it's poetic, and it's nice. And so it's how interesting that the place in the human body, the organ which bears the baby, it comes from the same root, the rechem, the place that's supposed to be for protecting the unborn, that's supposed to be a place of mercy and love and growth and even pity. And we see how twisted the prince of this world is, and that in countries like the United States and in European countries as well, and even so sadly, even in Israel, that abortion is a legal procedure. That it's legal to, you've got the thing, the baby growing inside the woman. They do these horrific procedures where they go in and they just kill the thing. They tear it to pieces, and it's really god awful at different stages in the development. And the fetus feels pain, right? The baby, he feels pain. And it's so ironic that a lot of these people, now you know me, I'm an animal lover, so but a lot of these people would be against killing a kitten. The people that are in favor of this sort of thing, against hurting a kitten, right? Euthanizing a kitten. But at the same time, they're pro euthanizing a child that's in the womb. And there's no pain medication that's given. It's not like like when people want to kill an old person, they try to make it seem like it's righteous by giving them pain medications and they're not going to feel it. There's none of that for this baby. If you've ever seen a video of an ultrasound of an abortion, it's horrific. The baby leans back like it's screaming. It's in pain. Nobody cares about that. So it's one thing that they don't even care to kill, to murder, but they also don't even care. There's no secondary thought like euthanasia has, because the child has no voice, right? So woe to any of the countries where this is legal, and especially to those where they force it on their citizens. That is wickedness to the extreme, to ever force someone to kill a child in the rechem, in the place which is supposed to be a mercy. It's like Dan mentioned earlier today. In his Josh, he mentioned it's like today the spirit of Molech is alive and well. And we see this with the abortion industrial complex, right? We see this with, in the States, there's so much money in the abortion industry. And abortions can make hundreds and hundreds of dollars in 15 minutes of his time when they really get it efficient, right? It's estimated that there have been, actually I'm not sure about the number, so I don't want to share the estimate. I'm not sure if my source is good, but millions of abortions in the U.S. alone. So now we have an interesting thing. I implore all of you, like we mentioned earlier today, please pray for the U.S. We have this for the first time in history. A Supreme Court opinion, majority opinion, has been released, stolen, before they voted on it, before the court actually voted, right? So this meant that the justice understood, he had the votes, it was going to be a narrow 5-4 or sort of thing, like very small vote victory, but nevertheless, to overturn Roe versus Wade, this is in 1973 when the evil judges decided to make abortion legal in the United States, where it was not legal except in Hawaii at that time, and even then only extreme circumstances. So we have this real opportunity, and you see the evil, the leftists are going crazy. They're just losing their minds. Protesting, they're going to the judges' houses, and the wicked president has nothing to say about it. Oh, we have no position on protesting at someone's personal residence, right? So people are trying to intimidate these judges. They're trying to frighten them, and I'm concerned that someone will try to kill one of the justices. And then we have a liberal administration, so they'll just put in another wicked judge, and that's it. That's the end. So if you want to be informed, what this means is it doesn't mean that abortion will end in the United States. What it means is that each state, it's like more democracy, basically. More democracy, better democracy. That each state in the United States will have the right to make their own laws about abortion. They can say it's illegal. In Texas, if they don't want abortion, they can say illegal. You can't do it here, right? And this is actually very important because from the spiritual principle, if you have an idolater in your village and he erects an idol on his property in public view, you have to kill him and tear down the idol, or the whole city gets rechem, it gets under the ban, gets destroyed by Torah, right? That's how the justice works. You see a reprehensible act and you don't take action, then you're guilty as well, right? You're guilty for allowing that stuff to happen. And so, at least in the United States, if this happens, this will protect many of the states from the coming retribution from Hashem. So, if Texas and Arkansas and Florida and maybe Arizona, we'll see, and some of the other Alabama, some of the other states, if they actually ban abortion, then the spirit of Molech will not be ruling in those places anymore. And it will just be New York and California and the others that get the punishment. Otherwise, because we tolerate it in those other states, for the Americans listening, there's a great danger. So for any Americans who hear this, Josh, my goodness, you can never vote Democrat. Shame on you if you ever voted Democrat. You got to stop. I'm not saying Republicans are great, but you cannot vote for the party that's pro-death. It's like a death cult, basically. They're for abortion. They're for the homosexual marriages. They're against school prayer. They're against the Bible being read, except for the book of Job, right? Because if you read the book of Job, and that's the only book you read, you have no idea about how God really works. It makes it look like God's unfair, out of context, right? So it's so funny if you talk to a liberal in the States and you say, hey, have you ever read the Bible? So I read Job, because they read it in college, because their professors wanted to mock God about the context, right? So they read Job because it seems so unfair, right? And it's very distant, the thinking, the ancient Near Eastern thinking that happens in Job, like, because it ends like he got more kids back, right? Like that somehow makes it okay for the other kids dying. So people don't really understand Job very well. And the language in Job is very, very difficult. It's really hard to understand a lot of Job without getting a lot of Phoenician words in there. So that's the thing to pray for. Pray that the Supreme Court justices in the states will be courageous and that they'll be safe and they'll move forward with this vote coming up in June on this case that they're reviewing, and they will strike down this wicked, evil court case that happened in 1973. That the rechem can once again be a place of protection for the unborn. This is something that's great here in the Philippines. There's not a lot that I like about the government here. There's not a lot I like about the culture here, if we're being honest. Like a lot of stuff, it just drives me crazy. And I've lived all over the world, right? So it's not just I'm just used to my own culture. That's all I can stand, right? So there's a lot of ayin hara, and stuff like that. But one thing, if any Filipinos, most of you are Filipinos listening in our kahal, if you want to be proud about the Philippines, be proud that it's a pro-life country, that abortion is illegal here, and let's pray that whatever candidate gets elected this Monday in the elections, that it will be someone who fears God and who likes the Bible and doesn't mock the Bible and doesn't mock people of faith like we've had to endure these last several years. Let's pray that it's somebody who really, really is not pro-communist, which is an anti-God system, right? And as a system of teaching godlessness to people, but it will be someone who is pro-God, whatever the economic system is that is pro-God, that has a fear of God. Even if that ends up being an agnostic who at least fears God truly, and they will not allow abortion to become legal in the Philippines. I've heard there's talk about legalizing, and that would just be horrible, horrible thing. That's something I believe the fact that you guys protect the unborn is something that keeps the judgment of God at bay, right? I mean, if you lift up that and let Molech in on top of the idolatry and everything else, well then, God help us. God help us. All right, verse 23. V'tahar v'teled bain. Then she got pregnant and she birthed a son. V'tomer, and she said, Asaf Elohim et chepati. So she said, Asaf, and I have this in yellow. Actually, it's kind of interesting. Usually this word means to add, right? Like to add to, right? But sometimes it means to remove. Again, context in Hebrew is just, and an enormous thing. And so in this case, she's saying remove. And I was thinking maybe it's because the idea is you're still adding, but you're adding it over there, right? You're adding it somewhere else. You're taking it from here and you're adding it over there. And as we'll see, some of the sages, they agree with that opinion. So she says, God has removed my cherpa, my reproach, my disgrace, like that, right? The fact that maybe the other women, maybe they didn't speak openly about her, but some of the sages think that there was some kind of Lashon Hara happening, or maybe some of the servants, oh, she's the one who can't have babies, right? Can you imagine there's 4 wives and you're the only one who can't have babies, right, out of 4? It'd feel kind of bad, right? Especially in those days. Today, we see more value in women than just childbearing, right? But if that was back then, look, everything, the strength of the family, the strength of the clan, it's all based on being able to bring children, especially sons, into the world, right? That they could carry on the clan's name. The girls would be married off to another clan, right? Not that girls are less or something, but so the psyche and the ethos of the clans were that they wanted boys, right? They wanted boys. And so now, not only does she have a child, but she has a son, which is really huge. So let's go over my comments. I'll share with you. Let's see. On vayizkor, a barmel comments, now God remembered Rachel, responding immediately to what Leah imagined, that she had gotten Rachel's share of the 12 sons, right? So God's saying, no, you don't. You're not going to have it. And then on Asaph, Nachmanides comments about God taking away her cherpa, her disgrace. See the comments of Rashi and Ibn Ezra. As Onqelos correctly understands, that's Targum Onqelos in the Aramaic, the verb really means that God has collected her disgrace. It will no longer be scattered among gossiping people, right? So the idea is at least she doesn't have to hear it. So that kind of goes with the idea of Asaph maybe meaning to gather it over there, right? So it still could have the idea of gathering, but it's over there. Okay, on to the comments or questions. Let's go to the next verse. Yes. And I was happy about this because I wasn't familiar with Rashi saying it was gathered in, and that was kind of my own idea. And I saw Rashi says gathered it in, so Baruch Hashem. That was correct. I understand. Verse 24. Vatikraha et shemo Yosef le'emor. Pardon me, le'emor. Then, so she called his name Yosef, right? So it's from Yasaf, which means to add to, right? Yeah. So, or to add together like that. Let's see my comment here. Okay, the Rashbam comments, because God had taken away her disgrace. Why then did she not name him Asaph? Right? So it's kind of nice, the rabbinical mind thinking about things. Where does the J, the Y in Hebrew, of Joseph come from? And then the Rashbam answers his own question from her prayer. May Adonai add another son for me. So Asuf, right, is what it is. May he add in the for you Hebrew students, the Joseph with Joseph force, the Yod is there. So this name is a combination of both things, she said, according to the Rashbam. Yosef Adonai li benacher. Okay, verse 25. Vayihi kasher ילדה רחל את יוסף, ויאמר יעקב אל לבן, שלחני ואליך אל מקומי ולארצי. So it happened according then that Rachael gave birth to Yosef, or when she gave birth to Yosef. Asher is very flexible. Vayomer Yaakov, that Yaakov said El Laban unto Laban, Shalacheni, send me out, ve'elecha, so that I might indeed go El Mekomi, to my place, ule artzi, and to my eretz, to my land. So the understanding is that he says now, because now it's the completion of the 7 years of service for Rachel. Remember, he served for 7 years. He got tricked into Leah, and then When he's mad the next morning to Lavan, Lavan says, look, I'll give you Rachael now, but you can serve another 7 years for her, so you can have both, right? So he kind of cons him into another 7 years of service. And so he gets Rachael after the wedding banquet, after the 7 days of the wedding feast, so at least Leah's not totally depressed, right? She has some time with her man, although for sure he's angry. And then after 7 days, there was another marriage, and then 7 years of service. So it's like a loan. Rachel was a loan to him then. Okay. But now that's done. When the birth came, this is about marking the 7 years that they had been together. Okay. Verse 26. Tehena et nashai vet yaladai asher avati otecha bahen ve'elecha ki ata yadata et avodati asher avaticha. So, Tehena, let's give my nashai, give my women, give my wives, vet yaladai, and my children, asher avati, for whom I have served, oltecha, you, bahen, on their account. And notice bahen, that's the feminine one. So by this we understand that it's for the wives that he served, not for the children. Ki ata yadat. Okay, actually, let me mark this yellow part here. Let's see, we have a note. Ibn Ezra comments, give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you. For whom I have served you refers to the wives, not the children. Okay, so we can see that grammatically here. For them, this is a form that only applies to all females, right? So just the wives. The children, he has boys too, right? So it's not referring to them. Bahen. If it was everybody, it'd be Bahem, right? So the point was the children were the reason he wanted wives, right? So, but that's not what Lavan gave him. He gave him the wives. For you yourself know. So this extra word here, ata, we don't need this word. Yadata means you know, right? That ta at the end, it's from ata. Yadata, you know. But he adds an ata. So Jacob is now speaking with special emphasis. He's making a strong point. He's saying, you yourself, yadata, know. Et avodati, my avodah, my labor, asher avaticha, with which, for the Hebrew guys out there, this is an accusative of means. That's why it's with which, or like farito lipadyesh, instrumental case, avaticha, with, as I served you. So, with my labor, with which I have served you. And there's a little play on words Jacob's doing here. If you listen, avodati asher avaticha. You see, you hear it? Avodati asher avaticha. So there's rhymes and connotation and alliteration and stuff happening. And this is what's really great about reading the text in the Hebrew. Sometimes we find like a gem, something that's mistranslated, or the translator was biased and they selected the slant on it that they wanted that doesn't exactly match what's in there. And sometimes we just notice the language and we notice how the speaker speaks differently from other speakers, right? We notice how this particular speaker, this is something I was telling the Hebrew class, one of my Hebrew classes this week, I don't remember which one, but I was talking about how it's so amazing that in the Bible, and you never hear people make this point in apologetics, but it's a nice little apologetic point that I've noticed over the years. When you read the Bible in the original language, different people speak differently. They have different vocabularies, they have different speech styles. Sometimes they use something from their own dialect, like something from Aramaic comes in, like Rachael. Rachael, instead of hazeh, which is how we usually say this thing in Hebrew, hazeh, she says halazeh, right? So you see it in the way she speaks, right? So it's just amazing. Of course, it's all glossed over when you read in translation. All that's just beneath the surface, right? And again, theologically, it's not that important, but it's nice to see that the text was preserved, that even the speech patterns of people, the way they talk in Hebrew, like Joseph uses lots of Egyptian words when we get to Joseph, right? He lived in Egypt for a long time. It makes sense. So it's really, really fantastic and remarkable. I'm surprised. I've never heard anybody talk about this before, not ever. But it's one of those things that it's obvious in the text when you're reading along, maybe you're doing the voices, like I like to do the voices or whatever. And the different people, they talk differently. Like even Eliezer, Abraham's servant, he uses different words. like some weird words for Hebrew. So he's still got his own dialectical things that he's dealing with. Or in the Psalms, there's one of the Psalms we know that a foreigner wrote it. We know that it was a convert, that Hebrew is not his native language because of the weird Canaanite words that he uses in there, right? But it made in the Psalms because he joined Israel, right? He was grafted in. And so you see this stuff. It's not just about discovering, oh, this word means this changes the theology. Yeah, that happens. That happens a lot too, right? But also, you get to see the voices of the individuals coming through, right? It's a beautiful thing. And here we see Jacob, he's doing his play on words thing, so it's kind of nice. And Yeshua does the same sort of thing a lot too. He'll use play on words, etc. So, all right, I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to get across. That the text in the original language is really amazing in that the people who memorized this and later wrote it down for us, later when Moses wrote it down, lots of this was memorized already, right? And Moses, he wrote it down based on the memories. They had bothered to memorize precisely the wording. Even when someone talked weirdly, even a word that we didn't use anymore, okay, that's the way it was memorized. And this even comes through later in the Tanakh. There's lots of places in the Tanakh where we have the ketiv form of a word, which means how it's written, is some strange word that sometimes we don't know what that means. So the Masoretes in the Kere, they correct it in the column. They say probably this is this word, right? But there may have been some weird dialect at the time, or they felt it might be a mistake, but they didn't want to change it, right? Or because we had lots of dialects in Hebrew, many dialects in biblical Hebrew, and the language developed over 1,000 years. So anyway, that's just something that I love in the text, and I hope you guys can feel a little bit when we're going through the Hebrew together. Verse 27. Vayomer Elai Lavan im na'ah matzati chen be'einecha. Okay, so let's translate that. So, um, he says. So Laban said to him, "If now I have found favor, matzati chen, I found favor." But and some people they translate chen as like grace, grace. You'll hear people saying, "Oh, chen." Every once in a while, someone will say chen, or if it's like a Baptist preacher, maybe it's from the South in the States, they'll say chen. But I've heard that. I hear that a lot. The ch using a Strong's Concordance or something. But chen, this is not the kind of grace that you think it is, right? This chen, this kind of grace is like she moves with grace, right? Okay, like she was graceful in that dress or whatever. Okay, so yeah, it's grace in English, but it's not. This is not the grace you're looking for, right? Okay, this is, and the other meaning of this one is like favor, right? So this is favor. So matzatichen, I found favor. Like maybe the idea is that like I moved with grace, I spoke graceful words that you felt were eloquent or whatever. So if now I found grace, the ainecha, in your eyes, right? Meaning in your sight, nichashti. So this is kind of weird. So this is related to nachash, right? The nachash. So nichash means to divine, Like it can also mean, well, we'll just stick with divine. It means like using tools or using diviners, trying to find out the future, right? Or trying to find out things that are usually unknowable, right? And so nichashi. So he's saying through divination, I found out something. So this is a little section from my book that I thought was decent to share with you guys. So Nichesh is usually interpreted as to predict, give omens, or seek, right? This is where we get the idea of divining. It's from omens that they see, like birds in the sky, or how the clouds dissipate, or today people would use tea leaves, right? Something like that. Here the context seems to be that Lavan is saying he has done well. The Septuagint translates it as oinizomai, to take omens from the flight and cries of birds. Oh, right, the cries also. Gah, gah, okay. Which is funny. I have the one rooster. Notice we don't hear the rooster anymore. We're in the studio, Baruch Hashem. But there's this one rooster that the neighbor has. It doesn't even sound like her. He's like. So I kind of missed that guy a little bit, hearing him on the recordings. So that's according to Little Scott. This is a famous British Greek lexicon. Lavan's Semitic dialect is different from Yaakov's, as we see later with the heap of stones. So the thing I was talking about, how people talk in the Bible, you're going to see that Lavan also talks differently. He speaks differently. The conversation, the way it's recorded in the Torah. This makes it plausible that Lavan may not have been referring to divination at all, but just saying he prospered because of Yaakov, as we have a connection with the Semitic language Akkadian Nakhashu, to prosper. Right? So Laban might not have been saying, I know through divination. He could just be saying, I've prospered. Right? This is a possible translation. And I got that Akkadian comment. I think that was from Sarna, Nahum Sarna, I think. Yeah, I should have put that in there. For sure, it's footnoted in my book. Okay, so imagine that. He's saying, I prospered. Why? Vayvaracheni, because Adonai blessed me. So that actually makes some sense. Even though we know that he does have teraphim, because later Rachael, she steals them, right? But it's still possible that Laban, see, look, is Laban a total idiot? Surely in these 14 years, he's learned something about Yaakov. And it's that he doesn't do divination, right? He serves El Shaddai, El Elyon, right? So even if people do stupid things like divination or tarot cards or whatever, they're not usually eager to share it with someone else who they know is a tzaddik, right? There's usually something inside them, they know it's wrong, they know it's childish or whatever. And so I think this adds a bit of credibility to the idea that Lavan, even if he might have divined, that might not be what he's saying to Jacob, right? He could be, again, his dialect, his language is not Hebrew, right? So he's got some other Semitic language going on, and so it could be influenced by Akkadian. Look how close that is, Akkadian, Nakhashu. And here the Hebrew, Nichash, Nichash. We put the T, that just means I, right? So imagine instead of Nichashu, imagine it's Nichashti. If we made that direct in Hebrew, Nichashti. Look, it's almost the same. Pardon me, Nechashti. Nechashti versus Nichashti. Very similar, right? So he could very well be saying, I have prospered because, the Vav can mean because, Adonai Yevaracheni, blessed me. Yevarech, and then the Eini means me. He blessed me. Biglalecha. Biglalecha. This is an interesting word in Hebrew. So it means because of you, right? Like on your account. But the root of the word is galal. Galal. Galal is like, it has the idea of going around, right? So here this guy, this one, galal, right? Like a Gilgal is a wheel, right? Golgelet, the place Golgelet, known as a skull because it's round, right? Golgelet, it's related to Galgal, right? And the places where people would meet in ancient Israel, where there was a big like circular pasture or whatever, and nobody lived there, nobody raised crops there, those were called Gilgal. So we have many places in Israel called Gilgal. So here it's kind of like because of the circle of life. Not to get too Disney on you, but that's kind of the way this word is being used, right? Because of the way that life is circled back and forth between me and you, something like that. So if that helps you to remember it, great. On your account. Gersonides comments that rather by consideration and judgment, he's saying that's what Nichashti he thinks means. Just as Eliezer does in Genesis 24, and as Jonathan does in 1 Samuel 14. So Gersonides is taking the sage, he's taking the opinion that the modern scholar the guy I said before, Nahum Sarna has, yeah. So that's nice to see. He didn't have access to Akkadian language back then, right? So oftentimes the sages, they might make a linguistic mistake because they don't have the linguistic data we have today. But sometimes they still get there. They still get to the same. I love that. We get the same conclusion with a different approach to the problem, and we find it another way linguistically. Well, they're intersecting. Well, probably that's true. Probably that's the case there, right? Well, no questions today. Okay, good turnout though. Baruch Hashem. I hope my friend who was trying to come in made it. Actually, maybe I'll just take 30 seconds to send him the link. Yeah, let's just, I can say copy session link. I'm going to send that now. You guys don't mind, right? Just 20 seconds left. There we go. All right, so If you couldn't make it in, you should be able to get in now. Okay, verses 28 and 29. Oi, I didn't mean to put my note up yet. Go back. I'm going back to laser pointer. All right. Now this is kind of an oddly marked sentence because you see the little wishbone here underneath the mem, the etnachta. Some call it etnach, atnach, whatever. So the etnachta is like a semicolon, right? It separates out major clauses in a sentence, especially if one of those clauses is Santa Claus. You separate that clause right out, keep it out. So here it's on the first word. It's the very first word, which is not that common. It's weird for me to see it, right? Because usually you'd have your idea, right? Your idea. So what this means is when they put down those accent marks, this is how they had it memorized. The Masoretic group, they memorized it this way. So I didn't notice that till just now, so I didn't really think about it too much. If anybody has an idea why we might end the clause right there. So basically it goes like this. Vayomar, right here. That's how you start singing. Vayomar, right? Like we're done with the thought. Da 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 da. So it just says, so he said. Is what that means. So he said. Nakivaha Zakhar alai ve'etena. So nakava means like bore out, to dig out, to dig out. Yeah, dig out, literally dig out secharacha, your wage, right? Like what I should pay you, alai, to me, ve'etena, and I will definitely give it. A little hey at the end. Now he's speaking with some emphasis. This hey is like an exclamation point in there. It's an emphatic hey. Or for those of you in intermediate Hebrew, you know that this is the cohortative form, right? So you think of it like a little exclamation point. Etain means I'll give, right? Etena. So etena, I will definitely give. Okay. Now on boring out, drilling out, the Targum translates this as specify, right? So Jacob says, dig it out, like drill it out. Like this is similar to one of the words we have for a cave. And it's actually similar to the word for female, nekeva, right? I won't get into why, but you can think about the difference between men and women. Maybe you can figure it out. So in the Targum, Onkelos understands this to mean specify very specifically what my wage is. No more of these games, right? You can serve for this one, and after 7 years, ha ha, sucker. What I meant was, la 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 la. You can serve a little bit. So you can, and I'll give you the other one. All right, verse 29. Vayomer elahav ata yadata et asher avaticha. See, there's all right. Nachal makes sense. You got all this stuff happening, and here's the end of the thought, right? So I'll translate it. You can see it's like a thought. So, and he said unto him, "You yourself know how I have served you," right? So it's a thought, right? It makes sense. Whereas up here, it's just so he said, and then he said. So it's kind of strange. ואת אשר היה מקנך איתי, and how your herds were with me. Sforno comments that the herds had contained defective animals, maimed ones, etc. And he's saying, I cured these using my expert knowledge in raising sheep and cattle, right? He's no kid anymore. He's an expert at what's going on here. Oops, I hit the camera. I think we let me. Oh, hold on a second. There we go. Okay. Verse 30, and here we've got quite a bit. Maybe I'll just read through. Talking about communication. כי מעט אשר היה לך לפני ויפרוץ לרוב ויברך אדוני אותך לרגלי. So, כי מעט אשר היה לך, for it was a very little which happened to you or against you. Nephalai, on my watch, literally means before me or because of my face, right? Vayifrotz, that what was dispersed, larov, of the abundance, vayivarech Adonai, and so Adonai blessed Otechai, you, leragli, because of my foot. That's what it says, because of my foot. So this is an idiom, Rashi says, meaning wherever I turned. Literally, it's at my foot, right? Ibn Ezra clarifies better. He says, wherever I turned, literally for the sake of my foot. The Hebrew idiom is that someone has a lucky foot. In our case, the sense is, you have been blessed from the moment I arrived in your household, Ibn Ezra. And Nachmanides comments that Yaakov uses this phrase out of modesty, right? He didn't want to say, on my account, as Lavan had said. You see, so Lavan just said, on your account, right? But then Yaakov is being a bit modest. He's saying, leragli, right? Because of my foot, like what I happen to be handling. All right, verse 31. Vayomer, so he said, Ma iten lach, what shall I give to you? Vayomer, and Yaakov said, Lo titen li me'uma, you shall not give me a thing, not even a dot. Im ta'aseh li hadavar hazeh, but if you will do for me this thing, ashuva, then indeed I will return. I will indeed shepherd sonachai your flocks, esh more. I will safeguard them. I will protect them. So the Bekhor Shor comments on this lo titen li me'uma, pay me nothing, right? This is about the back wages, how he ripped him off, basically, right? And Lavan was willing to correct it, but he's saying, nope, since my wages will be the kinds of animals that are never naturally born. This is Bekhor Shor's opinion, that he's choosing ones that are not so common. So Laban thinks he's getting a deal, right? But really, we know what's going to happen. Abarmel says, whatever you owe me for my past labors, I am waiving it. That's what he means by lo titen li me'uma. All right, now here's what I've done. I have the rest of the Torah back-ended to the drash because I felt like the last couple times, well, on Pesach, there's nothing we can do about it, but I've been going a bit longer, and it seemed like you guys really rejoiced when we settled down on like an hour and a half, right? So, yeah. So I'm trying to get it more towards an hour and a half. So here's what we'll do. We're going to do the Haftarah. We're going to do the stuff that I want to talk about from the Apostolic Writings. And let's see how the Ruach leads, and let's see how time is. Probably we'll can the rest of the Torah portion, right? And besides, you already went through it, right? You're supposed to read on your own. And this is not technically a Torah service right now. This is just a drosh, yeah? Okay.